Carl Jung said something that no one wanted to hear. He looked at the one institution that every human being is taught to believe in, to fight for, to sacrifice everything for. And he said, marriage is not a love affair, it is an ordeal. People were shocked. They called him cynical, bitter, wrong. But Jung was none of those things. He was a scientist who spent decades sitting across from broken people, listening to their pain, studying their wounds, and following the evidence wherever it led. And the evidence led him somewhere deeply uncomfortable. He discovered that marriage, the very institution built to bring two souls together, was quietly, slowly destroying them. Not through betrayal, not through hatred, not through dramatic collapse, but through something far more dangerous than any of those things. Something that creeps in silently while you are busy living your life, until one morning you wake up, look at the person sleeping beside you, and feel absolutely nothing. Jung saw this happen again and again in the most loving couples, in the most beautiful homes, in the most picture-perfect lives. And he asked himself one question: why does the very thing we build our entire lives around so often become the thing that hollows us out completely? The answer, he found, will change how you see your relationship, your partner, and most importantly, yourself forever. Let me show you. Jung was not against love, and that is the first thing you need to understand before we go any further. He believed in deep, transformative, soul-shaking love. He had experienced it himself. He had witnessed it in others. But he also witnessed something else, something that nobody talks about openly, something that begins the moment two people decide to build a life together. He called it psychological fusion, the slow, invisible process where two separate identities begin merging into one blurred, undefined, suffocating mass. It starts so innocently that you never even notice it happening. You start making decisions together, thinking alike, wanting the same things, defining yourself entirely through the other person. I am his wife. I am her husband. And somewhere in that merging, something precious begins to disappear. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, the way a candle fades, not when someone blows it out, but when it simply runs out of itself. Jung said this is not love, this is absorption. And absorption is where the soul begins to suffocate. But what exactly gets absorbed first is something most people never realize until it is far too late. Jung once worked with a woman who had everything the world told her to want: a successful husband, a beautiful home, healthy children, a life that looked, from the outside, absolutely perfect. But she sat down in Jung's office one afternoon, and he asked her one simple question. Tell me, who are you? She opened her mouth confidently, ready to answer, and then something happened that she did not expect. Nothing came out. She tried again, slowly this time. I am Michael's wife. I am the children's mother. I am... And then she stopped completely and wept. Because in that moment she realized with devastating clarity that she had no answer of her own. 17 years of marriage, 17 years of giving, sacrificing, accommodating, disappearing, and not a single year of simply being herself. Jung wrote about her afterwards. She had given everything to everyone around her and kept absolutely nothing for herself. Maybe you recognize something in her story. Maybe you have felt that same quiet hollowness, that same strange disconnection from your own reflection. Because what happened to her is not rare at all. It is happening in millions of marriages right now.
and it begins with something Jung identified that every single one of us does the moment we fall in love.
The moment you fall in love with someone, you begin doing something completely unconscious, completely automatic, and completely devastating. You begin performing. Not deliberately, not dishonestly, but naturally, the way all human beings do when they desperately want to be accepted by someone they care about. Jung called this the persona, the carefully constructed version of yourself that you present to the world and especially to your partner. You stop saying what you really think because you're afraid of conflict. You stop wanting what you really want because you're afraid of judgment. You laugh at things that quietly hurt you. You stay silent in moments when every part of you is screaming to speak. And slowly, so slowly you never notice it happening, the mask becomes more comfortable than your own face. Jung worked with a man once, married for 12 years, who confessed something extraordinary. I have not said a single completely honest thing to my wife in years. Not because he was deceptive, but because somewhere along the way, honesty had started to feel more dangerous than silence. Jung looked at him and said, "The tragedy is not that you wear the mask. The tragedy is you have forgotten there is a real face beneath it. And when you forget your real face, something begins growing in the darkness behind it that will eventually demand to be seen." Everything you hide behind that mask does not simply disappear. That is the thing nobody tells you. That is the uncomfortable truth Jung spent decades trying to make people understand. Every feeling you swallow, every need you suppress, every part of yourself you bury to keep the peace, goes somewhere. It sinks deeper and deeper into what Jung called the shadow, that dark, hidden reservoir inside every human being, where everything rejected, denied, and silenced slowly accumulates. The anger you smiled through, the resentment you disguised as patience, the dreams you quietly abandoned, the version of yourself you sacrificed, one small compromise at a time. All of it lives there, waiting. Jung worked with a man once who seemed, by every outward measure, to be the perfect husband. Gentle, calm, accommodating, never raised his voice, never complained, always endlessly patient, until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, over something completely insignificant, he exploded and destroyed everything: his marriage, his family, his entire life. When Jung worked with him afterwards, the man kept saying, "I don't know what happened. It came out of nowhere." But Jung knew exactly what had happened. "It did not come from nowhere," he said quietly. "It came from 20 years of nowhere, all at once. The shadow always finds a way out. Always. And in marriage, when two people's shadows finally meet each other, what happens next is something that will make you rethink every argument you have ever had." Jung made a discovery that will completely change how you see every argument, every cold silence, every moment of unexplained rage you have ever experienced inside your relationship. He said that when two people fight in a marriage, they are almost never fighting about what they think they are fighting about. The dishes left in the sink, the money spent without asking, the tone of voice used in a tired moment, the forgotten anniversary, the missed phone call. These are never the real fight. They are simply the spark that ignites something far older, far deeper, far more painful than any of those surface irritations could ever be.
Jung worked with a couple once who came to him arguing about something so trivial he almost smiled when he heard it. An unpaid electricity bill. That was it. That was what had brought them, furious and exhausted, to his office. But as Jung listened carefully, beneath the anger, beneath the blame, he found the real story. She had felt completely invisible for years, unseen, unheard, taken for granted in ways she had never once directly expressed. He had felt suffocated for just as long, controlled, criticized, slowly crushed by expectations he could never meet. Neither of them had ever said any of this out loud, not once, not in years of living together. And that one unpaid bill became the explosion for everything that had never been spoken. Jung wrote afterwards, they were not fighting about money, they were bleeding from wounds neither of them had ever admitted existed. So ask yourself honestly, what is it that you have never said? Because what lives unspoken inside a marriage does something to the soul that cuts far deeper than any argument ever could.
Jung said something once that stopped many of his colleagues completely silent. He said, "The most dangerous marriages are not the violent ones. They are not the ones filled with screaming and broken dishes and dramatic betrayals. The most dangerous marriages are the quiet ones. The ones where nothing dramatic ever happens, no explosive fights, no obvious cruelty, no clear villain and no clear victim, just silence. A slow, heavy, suffocating silence that settles over two people like dust settling over furniture in a room that nobody uses anymore. Two people sitting across from each other at dinner every night with nothing left to say, nothing left to feel, nothing left to discover about each other. Jung worked with a woman once who came to him not because she was miserable, not because she was angry, not because anything dramatic had happened in her marriage. She came because she felt absolutely nothing. "I do not hate my husband," she told Jung quietly. "I want to make that clear. I do not hate him at all." She paused for a long moment. "But I do not love him either. I just exist next to him. Every single day, I exist next to him." Jung listened carefully, and then he said something that broke her open completely. "You are not in a marriage anymore. You are in a habit." She wept for a very long time after that, because the most painful part was not what he said, it was that she had already known it for years. And Jung believed he understood exactly why this happens, and the reason is something that begins long before you ever meet your partner. Jung believed something that most people find deeply uncomfortable to consider. He believed that the person you chose to marry was not really your choice at all. Not consciously, not freely, not the way you have always told yourself it was. Because beneath every conscious decision you have ever made about love, beneath every feeling of attraction, every sense of connection, every moment of recognition when you looked at someone and thought, "This is the one," your unconscious mind was already at work, quietly, invisibly, powerfully, searching not for the person who would make you happiest, but for the person who felt most familiar. Jung called this the parental imago, the deeply buried emotional blueprint formed in your earliest childhood of what love looks like, what it feels like, what it costs, and what it demands. And you spend your entire adult life unconsciously searching for someone who matches that blueprint exactly, even, and this is the part that will disturb you, even when that blueprint was built entirely from pain. He worked with a woman once whose father had been cold, distant, emotionally unreachable, no matter how hard she tried to connect with him. She came to Jung after her third marriage had collapsed. 3 different men, 3 completely different lives, 3 relationships that had each begun with genuine hope and genuine love. All 3 men cold, distant, emotionally unreachable. She sat across from Jung completely bewildered and asked him the question she had been asking herself for 20 years. Why do I keep choosing the same person in a different body? Jung looked at her with great gentleness and said, "You are not choosing a husband, you are choosing your father again and again, hoping that this time he will finally love you the way you always needed." She could not speak for a very long time, and when she finally did, she said something that Jung never forgot. "I think I have known that my whole life, I just could not bear to admit it." But here is what Jung discovered next about what that wound does once it is living inside your marriage every single day.
Jung said something that will make you see your marriage and every marriage you have ever witnessed in a completely different way. He said that every marriage has 2 visible people sitting at the table and 4 invisible ones. You, your partner, and both of your wounded inner children sitting right there between you, silently, invisibly, running absolutely everything. He called this the unconscious marriage, the relationship happening beneath the relationship, where 2 adults on the surface are actually 2 frightened children underneath, desperately trying to extract from each other what they never received growing up. One needs constant reassurance that they are loved because nobody made them feel secure when they were small. The other needs constant space and freedom because someone suffocated them when they were young. And they chose each other not despite this incompatibility, but precisely because of it. Because their wounds fit together like 2 pieces of the same broken thing. Jung worked with a couple once whose entire marriage had been consumed by a single, exhausting pattern. Every evening, without fail, the wife would ask her husband, "Do you love me?" And every evening, without fail, he would pull slightly away, become quieter, more distant. So she would ask again, more urgently this time, and he would withdraw further. She chased, he retreated. She panicked, he shut down completely. This had been happening every single day for 9 years. Jung sat with them both and said very quietly, "She is not asking her husband if he loves her. She is asking the mother who never held her if she was worthy of being held. And he is not rejecting his wife. He is escaping the father who suffocated every breath of independence he ever tried to take." They both wept, because for the first time in 9 years of marriage, they finally understood what they had actually been doing to each other. They were never really fighting each other at all. They were fighting ghosts. And those ghosts, Jung discovered, live inside every single marriage on Earth until the day someone finds the courage to finally face them.
There is a belief so deeply embedded in how we think about love that most people never even realize it is there. It lives beneath every romantic movie ever made, every love song ever written, every wedding vow ever spoken. And Jung believed it was the single most destructive idea in the entire history of human relationships, the belief that another person, the right person, can complete you. Jung called this the completion fantasy, and he said it is not love, it is hunger dressed up as love. He worked with a man married 4 times. Each marriage began with absolute certainty, this is the one. Each marriage ended the same way, emptiness, disappointment, quiet devastation. He came to Jung after his 4th divorce and asked, "What is wrong with me?" Jung looked at him and said, "Nothing is wrong with you, but you have been asking 4 women to do something no human being can do for another. You have been asking them to love you before you have learned to love yourself.
The man sat in silence for a very long time, because that one sentence contained the answer he had been searching for his entire life.
Jung said if he had to identify the single force most responsible for destroying marriages, it would not be betrayal, it would not be incompatibility, it would not even be indifference. It would be resentment. Quiet, patient, invisible resentment. Because betrayal is loud and obvious, but resentment hides perfectly beneath politeness, beneath routine, beneath the daily performance of a functioning marriage. Jung worked with a woman married for 23 years, universally described by everyone who knew her as the perfect wife. Patient, selfless, devoted, never complaining, never demanding. She came to Jung not because her marriage was falling apart. She came because every morning she woke up burning inside. She told Jung, "Every morning I smile at my husband at the breakfast table, and in that exact same moment something inside me is screaming." Jung asked what it was screaming. She looked at him with exhausted eyes. "When does someone ask about me? When does someone see that I am disappearing?" Jung wrote afterwards, "She did not resent her husband. She grieved the version of herself she had slowly given away and never once been thanked for losing. And that grief, when left unspoken for long enough, does not stay grief forever. It becomes a wall."
After everything Jung had witnessed, after decades of sitting with broken people in broken marriages, after documenting every way that love can quietly destroy the souls it was meant to nurture, you might expect him to have concluded that marriage itself was the problem. He did not. He believed the problem was never marriage itself. The problem was the unconscious way most human beings enter into it, the fantasy they carry through the door, the impossible weight they place on another person's shoulders before the first year is even finished. He called it the conscious marriage. Not a perfect marriage, not a painless one, but a marriage where two people commit, not just to each other, but to the truth. He worked with a couple once, together for 30 years, who had survived betrayal, loss, and years of profound disconnection. Jung asked what had kept them together. The husband looked at his wife quietly and said, "We never stopped being curious about each other." Not, "We never stopped loving each other." Not, "We stayed for the children." We never stopped being curious about each other. Jung wrote those words down immediately, because curiosity means I do not think I fully know you yet. I want to keep discovering who you are becoming, and a marriage built on that can survive almost anything. But building that kind of marriage requires one thing that most people spend their entire lives desperately avoiding.
Jung said something that will challenge everything you believe about fixing a broken relationship. He said the only way to save your marriage is to first save yourself. Not your partner, not the relationship, not the dynamic between you, yourself. Because you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot love deeply if you do not know yourself deeply. You cannot be truly seen if you are hiding even from yourself. Jung called this the inner work, the willingness to face your shadow, your wounds, your patterns, everything you dragged unconsciously into your marriage without ever realizing it. He worked with a couple once on the verge of divorce. 26 years together, 3 children, 1 completely broken home. Jung did not work with them together. He worked with them separately and asked each one the same question. Who were you before this marriage? Both of them wept because neither could remember. Jung said to each of them, find that person again, become that person again, and then choose each other again. They did not divorce.
not because the marriage became perfect, but because they finally understood. A healthy marriage is not two people holding each other up. It is two whole people standing firmly on their own and choosing every single day to stand together. And that one truth changes everything.
Here is the conclusion. Jung left us with one truth that sits above everything else he ever discovered. He said, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. Not your spouse, not your children, not your partner, yourself. Because every relationship in your life is a mirror, reflecting back exactly what lives inside you, your wounds, your patterns, your unconscious, your unfinished business. And marriage is the clearest mirror of all. So if your marriage is painful right now, do not only look at your partner, look at yourself. Ask yourself honestly, who did I become inside this marriage? What did I bury? What did I lose? What is it finally time to reclaim? Because it is never too late to wake up, to do the work, to choose yourself. And in choosing yourself, you give your marriage its only real chance. If this video opened something in you, subscribe to SYC Soul. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and leave one word in the comments, just one word, that describes what you felt watching this. You already know the word. It is already there.